I think it's so important that we recognize that we could reset and that we could restart at any point in time. And in order to fully understand that, it's about recognizing that the past doesn't exist anymore and the future doesn't exist yet. And all that we have is the present moment, right here and right now. And in recognizing that, it's about recognizing that each present moment is almost separate from the ones before it. In the sense that if the present moment is the only thing that exists, then you're not tied to the things that have happened before, and you're not tied to the things that have yet to happen. So then you have the ability to change yourself at any given point in time. And I think it's so important that we recognize that we do have the ability to reset and restart at any point in time, especially in relation to the internal versus the external. And I think it's about recognizing that the internal almost directly impacts the things that happen to you externally. Because God doesn't judge you based on the things that happen to you. He focuses on the things that you do. He focuses on the way that you treat other people, the way that you exist within the world. And that's a direct response, and that's a direct reaction to who you are internally. We don't have control over anything external. I can't add a single hair to my own head, but I have full control over my own thoughts and my own emotions. So in recognizing that you can restart at any given point in time, I think it's about recognizing the fact that emotionally you can restart at any point in time. Because I think so often we, tend to focus on the external too much. We tend to allow the external to dictate the internal rather than the opposite, allowing the internal to dictate the external. And I think that's what the Bible means, and I think that's what God means when he says that we should not focus on the things of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of our minds. It's not necessarily about being focused on and being emotionally dependent on the things that are happening to you, but rather almost controlling your emotions first, and then everything around you will then react and act in accordance to that. So when I say that you can, restart at any point in time, that you can reset at any point in time, it's about recognizing that so often, we may wake up on the wrong side of the bed and we may think, immediately, it's going to be a bad day. But that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. You can substantiate any positivity, any love, any joy, any peace at any given point in time. It's not required of you to, react emotionally to things that are happening around you. So even if you do end up waking up on the wrong side of the bed, if, something I've been doing a lot recently is just closing my eyes for a second, or not even, but rather just substantiating the thoughts that I want to think. Substantiating the circumstances that I want to happen and imagining those things and living through those things happening. And in doing so, it literally changes the way that you feel. Because instead of focusing on the problem, you're focusing on the solution. I heard something about F1, I'm pretty sure it was. And it said that drivers, when they're about to crash, they're trained to always look in the opening between cars, regardless of how close they are to a wall. And I think that speaks levels on the way that we look at our problems and the way that we look at our current circumstances when we want to be in better ones. We tend to focus so much on the wall, tend to focus so much on the things that are currently happening that we don't want to happen, rather than focusing on the things and thinking about the things that we do want to happen and substantiating those instead. I think that our subconscious mind is controlled by our emotions, so if we substantiate the emotions that we want to feel being in the place that we already are in, or the emotions that we want to feel if we were where we want to be, then that will almost allow ourselves to just naturally go there. It's not something that you have to force, it's something that you flow with. So I think it's so important that we recognize that we have the ability to control our emotions. We have the ability to control our thoughts. So why don't you feel the emotions that you want to feel and think the emotions that you want to think in accordance with where you want to be? And then if you allow yourself to do so, then you're almost allowing yourself to be where you want to be internally, which will then in turn allow it to happen externally. It's not necessarily about always reacting to the things that are happening to you, but rather allowing the things that are happening to you to react to who you are internally, to how you feel internally. Because if you're in a great mood, who could tell you that you're in a bad mood? I think the world reacts to the things that are happening to us internally, and it's about recognizing that we have full control over the internal, but no control over the external. Which seems a bit paradoxical, but it's not our job to control the things externally. That's God's job. The only thing that we can control is our internal. So So why don't we substantiate the thought that we want to think, the feelings that we want to feel, so much so to a point that we no longer care about the external changing. We no longer care about physically having the things that we're looking for. Because we never really cared about the physical. We never really cared about the car or the house. Because a car is just a piece of metal, a house is just a piece of brick. We always just cared about the feeling that it would give to us once we had those things. Maybe the validation, maybe the peace, maybe the security that we would feel once we have these things. So why don't we give ourselves those emotions right now? Why don't we imagine ourselves in that position so much so and so vividly to a point that we no longer care about having it because you could already give it to yourself internally. And in turn, almost paradoxically, you then allow yourself to obtain those things externally because it's no longer something that you're desperate for. Because the people that want something the most have it the least, and the people that want something the least have it the most. So why don't we get to a point where we're no longer dependent on the things that are happening around us? We are no longer dependent on the world, and that will then allow everything that we want to happen to fall into place naturally. I just think it's so important that we recognize that we can restart and we can refocus at any point in time. That even if you're in a bad mood at a given point, all it takes is literally substantiating one positive thought, imagining one scenario that you do want to happen that could completely change your mood for the better. And, it seems like it could be such a tedious thing, like, oh, I need to sit down and meditate for 15 minutes. But it doesn't need to be like that. You could be multitasking while you're doing it. Just be consciously allowing yourself to think what you want, the thoughts that you want to think. Imagining the scenarios that you want to happen rather than the ones that you don't want to happen. So I just think it's so important that we recognize that. The Bible verse I have for this video is taken from Isaiah 43, verse 18. And it says, forget the former things, do not dwell on the past. So, I hope you took something from this video. And thank you for watching.